Okay, so we're there in Proverbs chapter number 15. And as I said before we read the chapter, I asked you to look and pay careful attention to how often what was spoken was mentioned. Things that we were speaking, it talked about the tongue a lot, talked about the mouth, talked about the lips, and other things that also came up was other people speaking, because it talked also about listening and about hearing, about being instructed, about being reproved. Often these different things came up, We heard over and over the tongue, mouth, words, and even when it talked about prayer. Of course, when we pray, we think that's something that's going out of our mouth. We're praying. And so the title of the sermon this evening is The Value of Words. We're going to be talking about the value of words, what we say, what's spoken by us, and what's spoken by others is actually something that's very important. The Bible says in Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof." So think about that, death and life. Doesn't it sound pretty important? Death and life in the power of the tongue. So literally what you say, what people say, it affects entire lives. People's lives get destroyed by things that are said. People can be built up, people can be torn down by what is said. So our words, understand this, our words have value. They can be good, but they can also be bad. They can lead us or others in the right way, or they can lead us or others in the wrong way. And so what this means is that, our entire lives are basically steered by or controlled by the spoken word, by the tongue. So keep your place in Proverbs 15 because we'll be coming back there. But turn to James chapter number 3. James chapter number 3. James chapter number 3. Excuse me. James chapter number 3. Just after the book of Hebrews. James chapter number 3. Have a look at verse number 1. James chapter 3 and verse 1 says, "My brethren, be not many masters, knowing that we shall receive the greater condemnation." Now when it talks about a master, that's talking about like a master or a teacher. You might think in the old days that's what they called people at school, like a school master you might have had. Okay, well that's what this is talking about. When someone's a master, it's someone who's teaching. And it says, look, don't be in a hurry to be a teacher, because we will receive the greater condemnation. Now that's an important thing for pastors to remember. They're in a situation where they're teaching, so they need to be careful that what they teach is the right thing. But of course in our own lives, when we speak to people, we often assume the role of teaching someone something. And so we need to be careful that what we say is right, because if you're speaking things that are wrong, we'll receive greater condemnation. It's one thing to do something wrong yourself, but it's something else to cause someone else to do something wrong because of what you're saying. Look at verse number 2. "For in many things we offend all. If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body." And so notice that we all offend with what we say, with the words that we say, but it's especially easy for someone who's in a position of a teacher to offend. I get up here, several times a week and say stuff. I guarantee I'm going to say stuff that offends you. That's just the way it is. Now, sometimes it's because what I'm saying is this is what the Bible says and that offends you. But sometimes it's just because I'll say things that I shouldn't say. I'll say things wrong. I'll say things inappropriately, and I will offend people. That's just a fact. And when you're in a situation, you're more likely to offend. Okay. But the fact is, he says here, "If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man." And the word perfect just speaks of being like mature and being complete. And able also, notice this, to bridle the whole body. Now this concept is going to be continued as we move through this chapter. It says here, able to bridle the whole body. You think about a bridle, that makes you think of maybe like a horse, doesn't it? A horse. Well, have a look and see what it says in the next verse. Verse 3, "Behold, we put bits in the horses' mouths, that they may obey us, and we turn about their whole body." So think of a horse, you put a bit in its mouth, you're steering it with the reins. So by controlling where its mouth is going, you're controlling where the horse is going. Look at verse number 4. It says, "Behold also the ships, which though they be so great," so they're so large, they're so huge, "and are driven of fierce winds, yet are they turned about with a very small helm, whithersoever the governor listeth." So you think about like a sailing ship. It's driven by the wind. I did a wee bit of sailing when I was younger. I used to sail at Optimist, so that's not a particularly big boat. You can fit maybe a couple of people in if you're doing well. But You've got the sail, and think of when the wind's blowing strongly, the boat's going to race through the water. But you've got this thing you hold on to. It calls it the helm, but I think it was like the tiller or the rudder or something you might describe it as well, where it's just a piece of wood that's just poking down into the water. And as you pull this way, it turns it this way and turns it that way, and that affects where the boat's going. So and you could even, just with a couple of fingers, you can move it this way, move it that way, and the boat's going to completely change direction. Okay, it's turned, it's steered about by this little thing. Okay, then have a look in verse number 5. So we said the horse gets controlled by the bit in its mouth, and we said the ship gets controlled just by the very small helm. But then it says in verse 5, even so the tongue is a little member and boasteth great things. Behold how great a matter a little fire kindleth. Verse 6, and the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that it defileth the whole body, and setteth on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire of hell. So notice what it's saying here. In the same way that a bit is not a very large thing. Big horse, but just a wee thing in its mouth. Well, the tongue is a small thing. And yet it says, even though it's little, it boasteth great things. And then it talks about a fire in verse number 5. In fact, fire at the end of verse 5, verse 6, a fire, a fire, a fire. So when you think about a fire, the thing about a fire is that a fire is something that's very difficult to stop. You know, I don't really sort of follow the news too much, but I did hear there was some fires up Christchurch Way recently, and you know, the houses, I think some houses were burnt down, and obviously lots of trees and stuff. And I mean, once the fire got started, it was hard to stop, wasn't it? It took a lot of people, a lot of work to try and stop it. Well, it's saying the tongue is like a fire. What it means is when we say something, that can start a fire which sometimes we can't put out. So that means we need to be very careful what comes out of our mouth. It's very important what we need to stop and think before things come out of our mouth, because once it's gone out, it's like the whole tube in a toothpaste or something. You know, when you squeeze the toothpaste out of a tube, once it comes out, you can't sort of get it back in. But having said that, if you're really ingenious, you probably could if you manipulate it just right. It's probably easy. I think I've heard another example, a better example of that is, imagine going to the top of a tall building and getting a pillow full of like feathers, and then you just tear it open and then empty it on a windy day. Imagine trying to, you've got to collect all the feathers and put them back in. That's what it's like. You know, once it's gone, you can't stop it. Once it's gone out of your mouth. And so this is what's being spoken about the tongue. You can't stop this fire. And then it says in verse number 7, it says, for every kind of beasts and of birds and of serpents and of things in the sea is tamed and hath been tamed of mankind. So all these sorts of creatures mankind tamed. But then it says, but the tongue can no man tame. It is an unruly evil full of deadly poison. Okay, so notice what it says there. Back in verse 6 it said it defileth the whole body. It is set on fire of hell. And now in verse 8 it says it's unruly evil, it's full of deadly poison. So it sounds like the tongue has got potential for some pretty bad things. It's described as unruly evil, full of deadly poison. Verse 9, therewith bless we God even the Father, and therewith curse we men, which are made after the similitude of God. Okay, and so it's saying, basically what's happening as well, verse 10 says, out of the same mouth proceedeth blessing and cursing, my brethren, these things ought not so to be. So out of the same mouth, good things, like it says, blessing, out of the same mouth, bless we God, even the Father, and therewith curse we men, which are made after the similitude of God. So a lot of people will say a lot of religious words. They'll say, great things about God, but at the same time say nasty things about people. Okay, this is a similar, keep your finger in James, a similar concept as in 1 John chapter number 4. 1 John chapter number 4 and verse 20 says, if a man say, I love God, and hateth his brother, he is a liar. For he that loveth not his brother whom he hath seen, how can he love God whom he hath not seen? And this commandment have we from him, that he who loveth God love his brother also. So we're saying, look, you shouldn't just be saying, I love God, at the same time hate your brother. Because if you hate your brother, then you're lying when you say when you say that you love God. Well, it's the same thing. You shouldn't be, in James here, blessing God, but at the same time saying all sorts of nasty things about people. Verse number 11 says, doth a fountain sent forth at the same place sweet water and bitter? Can the fig tree, my brethren, bear olive berries, either a vine fig? So can no fountain both yield salt water and fresh. You say, look, you're not going to, out of the same place, you're not going to get a fountain that sends forth sweet water and bitter water. I mean, it's either going to be all bitter or it's all going to be all sweet. Or it says, can a fig tree bear olive berries, or can a vine bear figs? No, because it's like, you can't just, something different is not going to come out. And so what that is, that's a warning that what comes out of our mouth is going to often end up being all that comes out of our mouth. And so it's like once you start saying bad thing, it leads to more bad things and more bad things. I mean, I'm just thinking back, I remember when I was at school, and I mean, a lot of kids at school, they'll swear, okay? Now, they'll go to school and often they'll meet someone there, and that people at school swear. And they pick up bad language from people at school. And over time, they start doing it. And what happens, I mean, you can get to the stage where it's almost practically every second word that comes out as a swear word, And then sometimes they then go home and then the swear words come out and then they get in trouble. Okay, but that's that thing is, once something comes out, this is what it's saying here. It's like, it's really hard to be doing this over here and then doing something different over there. Look at verse number 13. It says, "Who is a wise man and endued with knowledge among you?" Who's wise? Who's got knowledge? Let him show out of a good conversation his works with meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter envying and strife in your hearts, glory not and lie not against the truth. Talk about telling lies. This wisdom descendeth not from above, but is earthly, sensual, devilish. For where envying and strife is, there is confusion in every evil work. But the wisdom that is from above, this is talking about God's wisdom, is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy, and the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace of them that make peace. So in this chapter where we've said all these things about the tongue, is that it finishes up talking about peace. These things, it says, is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, easy to be entreated. That means someone can talk to you and you're not going to jump down their throat. You're not going to bite their head off. Without full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality, without hypocrisy, and the fruit of righteousness sown in peace of them that make peace. Now turn back to Proverbs chapter number 15. Proverbs chapter number 15. And here we see that the very first verse says, "A soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger." So what this is talking about, this is saying that the words that you use, they can make peace. A soft answer turneth away wrath. So think about wrath, anger, fighting. People are getting mad with each other. But a soft answer can turn that away. What can that promote? That can promote peace, which is what we saw back in James, okay? A soft answer turneth away wrath, but on the other hand, grievous words stir up anger. So when something happens, when maybe someone's angry with you, someone's saying things that are, they're upset with something you've done or something you've said, we have a choice. We can respond back with, grievous words, and what's that going to do? That's actually going to make them madder. But if we use a soft answer, that can often turn away wrath. That can reduce, that can calm the conflict down. Have a look at verse number 2. It says, "The tongue of the wise useth knowledge aright, but the mouth of fools poureth out foolishness." So it's saying, if someone's wise, then their tongue is going to use the knowledge that they have in the right way. Okay? Everyone has knowledge, but when someone's wise, then their tongue, it's going to use it the right way. Because, did you know, you don't always have to speak? Do you know that? It's not something you have to do all the time. You don't have to always speak. So use knowledge aright. But in contrast, the mouth of fools poureth out foolishness. So doesn't it sound like one of them is using discretion as to when they speak, but one of them pours out foolishness? It says in Ecclesiastes 5:3, "A fool's voice is known by multitude of words." Here in Proverbs 15, just look back a couple of pages at Proverbs 10:19. Proverbs 10:19 says, "In the multitude of words," that means in lots of words, "in the multitude of words there wanteth not sin, but he that refraineth his lips is wise." So here you've got the contrast. Someone who's got lots of words, that's sin. Back in Ecclesiastes, it talked about a fool having multitude of words, but then it says, "He that refraineth his lips." That means who keeps his mouth back is wise. Okay? Verse number 4, back in Proverbs 15. Verse number 4 says, "A wholesome tongue is a tree of life, but perverseness therein is breach in the spirit." Okay, a wholesome tongue is a tree of life, but perverseness therein is a breach in the spirit. And so, just think about a wholesome tongue. That actually reminds me a little bit, well, when I see that, a tree of life, what does it say in Proverbs 11:30? It says, the fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and he that winneth souls is wise. So that reminds us of the fact that a wholesome tongue, speaking words that are right, speaking God's words, that's a tree of life. That leads to people being born again. That's good fruit that comes from that. But in contrast, perverseness therein is a breach in the spirit. In other words, speaking things that are perverse, speaking things that are wrong. That's not something that we should be doing. Have a look down at verse number 5. It says, a fool despiseth his father's instruction. Now, what's the normal way that a father would instruct a child? They would speak to them. They would tell them things. So it says, a fool despiseth his father's instruction, but he that regardeth reproof is prudent. So one person despiseth it. Who despises it? A fool despises it. But he that regardeth reproof is prudent. So the person who pays attention to reproof is prudent. Look down at verse number 7. It says, the lips of the wise disperse knowledge, but the heart of the foolish doeth not so. So the wise person's lips is giving out knowledge, but the foolish person, it says, the heart of the foolish doeth not so. And that's one of the reasons for that is because from the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. So when we speak things, where they come from, is it comes from in our heart. You can have a look and keep your place in Proverbs 15, but Luke 6, verse 45 is where that comes from. Luke chapter 6 and verse number 45. So it's good to, sometimes, it's good to see these scriptures and underline them, make a note of them. It says in Luke 6:45, a good man out of the good treasure of his heart. So when it says good treasure of his heart, treasure is something, don't you store up treasure, you save treasure. Out of the good treasure of his heart bringeth forth that which is good, and an evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart bringeth forth that which is evil, for of the abundance of the heart his mouth speaketh. So you got the picture there of two different people. They're both storing things in their heart. They're storing treasure. One's storing good treasure, one's storing evil treasure. And then from what's in their heart, that treasure, whether it's good or evil, out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh. Which means the man who stored good treasure is going to be speaking good things. The man who stored evil treasure is going to be speaking evil things. Look back at Proverbs 15. Excuse me. Back in Proverbs 15. Verse number 8. It says, the sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination to the Lord, but the prayer of the upright is his delight. And of course, a prayer, you think that's something that's coming out of your mouth. God likes the prayer of the upright, but the sacrifice of the wicked is abomination. In fact, it actually says the same thing, that even the whoso turneth away his ear from hearing the Lord, even his prayer shall be abomination. Verse number 10. Correction is grievous unto him that forsaketh the way, and he that hateth reproof shall die. So the whole thing, the Bible talks, obviously sometimes the correction that's talked about is like a physical correction. It talks about how you can correct with the rod, talking with disciplining children and stuff like that. But you can also correct with words. Okay? In fact, it even describes the difference. It says a wise man, you can correct him with words, but a foolish man, even if you bray him, even if you beat him, he still doesn't depart from his foolishness. Correction is grievous unto him that forsaketh the way, and he that hateth reproof shall die. So if you hate people telling you off, that means you're heading down the wrong path. You're better off, if someone's telling you off, you're better to listen to that and think, is there something, that I need to pay attention here? Is there something I can learn from this? Have a look at verse number 12. A scorner loveth not one that reproveth him, neither will he go unto the wise. A merry heart maketh a cheerful countenance, but by sorrow of the heart the spirit is broken. The heart of him that hath understanding seeketh knowledge, but the mouth of fools feedeth on foolishness. So that's really interesting. So remember we talked about the heart before, about the good man out of the good treasure of his heart bringeth forth that which is good. An evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart bringeth forth that which is evil. But then, how does it get there? It says here, the mouth of fools feedeth on foolishness. And so we need to understand that what it is we're feeding ourselves with, what we feed ourselves with is going to affect how we live our lives, because what we feed ourselves, that goes into the heart. And obviously it's not talking about like physical food. This is more to, actually have a look at Proverbs chapter 4. Just keep your finger in Proverbs 15. But look at Proverbs chapter 4 and verse 23. Proverbs 4 verse 23 says, keep thy heart with all diligence. It's like guarding your heart, protecting your heart. Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. So the issues of your life come out of your heart. Put away from thee a froward mouth, and perverse lips put far from thee. So it's saying, people who've got a froward mouth, a wicked mouth, people who've got perverse lips, people who are saying perverse things, should you be hanging around with those people? No, because if you're around them, you're going to be listening, you're going to be hearing perverse things, froward things. They'll be going into your heart. And if they're going to go into your heart, then they're going to come out of your mouth. Okay? Verse number 15, back in Proverbs 15. Verse number 15 says, all the days of the afflicted are evil, but he that is of a merry heart hath a continual feast. Verse 18, a wrathful man stirreth up strife, but he that is slow to anger appeaseth strife. So notice he says here, a wrathful man stirreth up strife. Now notice it talked about at the start in verse 1, a soft answer turneth away wrath. Well, here it's saying, a wrathful man stirreth up strife, but he that is slow to anger appeaseth strife. It says in James, actually have a look in James chapter number 1. James chapter number 1 and verse 19. James chapter 1 and verse 19. James 1 verse 19 says, wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, that's quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath, for the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God. So it's saying here, look, we need to be swift to hear, that means quick to listen, and we need to be slow to speak. Don't be in a hurry to speak. And also, don't be in a hurry to get angry, slow to wrath. For the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God. Ecclesiastes 7:9 says, be not hasty in thy spirit to be angry, for anger resteth in the bosom of fools. The Bible's saying, look, if you're angry all the time, now, is there times when we should be angry? Is there time to have anger? Yes, there is. Jesus was angry at times. He had righteous anger. We should be angry sometimes. But if you're angry all the time, it says, anger resteth in the bosom of fools. If someone's angry all the time, that's foolish. Look at verse number 22 of Proverbs 15. It says, without counsel purposes are disappointed, but in the multitude of counselors they are established. So it means we should be listening to counsel. A multitude of counsellors, and I like that especially this here. This is God's word. This is the counsel that we get. Okay, and the multitude of counsellors, we should be looking. What does it say here? What does it say here? What does it say here? And the multitude of counsellors are established. Verse 23, a man hath joy by the answer of his mouth, and a word spoken in due season, how good is it? The thoughts of the wicked are an abomination to the Lord, but look at this next part, but the words of the pure are pleasant words. So, remember we talked about that before in Philippians, about being pure, thinking about what's pure. The words of the pure are pleasant words. He that is greedy of gain troubleth his own house, but he that hateth gifts shall live. The heart of the righteous studieth to answer. Notice that. The heart of the righteous studieth to answer. If you study to answer, does that mean if someone says something, if you ask something or someone says something to you, do you just straight away answer them? Is that what that means? Would you say that's studying to answer? Or studying means you stop and think. You study. You think about it before you actually answer. Well, that's just what we saw back in James. It says take time. Be quick to listen, slow to speak. Have a look at Ecclesiastes chapter number 5. Ecclesiastes chapter number 5, just after Proverbs. Ecclesiastes chapter number 5 and verse number 1. Ecclesiastes 5 verse 1 says, keep thy foot when thou goest to the house of God, and be more ready to hear than to give the sacrifice of fools, for they consider not that they do evil. Be not rash with thy mouth. Rash, if you do something rashly, you do it quickly, in a hurry. Be not rash with thy mouth, and let not thine heart be hasty to utter anything before God. For God is in heaven, and thou upon earth. Therefore let thy words be few. It says in Proverbs 29:20, it says, seest thou a man that is hasty in his words? There is more hope of a fool than of him. So if we speak quickly, we're on a hair trigger to say something, and often when that's the case, it's because we're going to say angry words, we're going to say hurtful words. If it comes out quickly, it says there's more of a hope of a fool than of him. It says, where we were in verse number 27, it says, but the mouth of the wicked poureth out evil things. It sounds like we read before. Pouring out things, it's like a multitude of words. If you've got lots to say, then, in the multitude of words there wanteth not sin. Look at verse number 29. The Lord is far from the wicked, but he heareth the prayer of the righteous. The light of the eyes rejoiceth the heart, and a good report maketh the bones fat. A good report. Someone's reporting something that's good. Because that's what we were singing in Philippians chapter number 4. If there be any, what sort of good report, think on these things. Verse number 31. It says, the ear that heareth the reproof of life abideth among the wise. He that refuseth instruction despiseth his own soul, but he that heareth reproof getteth understanding. So notice, hearing is what we should be doing. We should be listening. Verse number 33, the fear of the Lord is the instruction of wisdom, and before honour is humility. Now, I didn't do a count up, but a huge number of verses in that chapter were about exactly that, weren't they? They were about reference to the tongue, reference to words, to the mouth, things that were spoken, praying, instruction, correction, all these different things. And so what we've seen is that what is spoken by us and what is spoken by others is very important. It can be good, it can be bad. It can lead us, or it can lead others in the right way, it can lead us in the wrong way. So let's look at some specific examples that we can apply in regards to guiding our speech. Okay, turn to Ephesians chapter number 4. Ephesians chapter number 4. Because it's all very well to say, well, we should, speak what's right, not speak what's wrong. But that's kind of very vague. There's nothing sort of really specific about that. How about this? Ephesians chapter number 4 and verse number 25. Ephesians chapter 4 and verse number 25 says, wherefore, putting away lying, speak every man truth with his neighbour, for we are members one of another. So, what should we be speaking? We should be speaking what is truth. We shouldn't be telling lies. Because one of the things about lies is God hates lies. Proverbs chapter number 6. This is actually, I should have told you to keep your, maybe you did keep your place in Proverbs. Proverbs chapter number 6. God really hates lies. It says in Proverbs chapter 6 and verse number 16, it says, these 6 things doth the Lord hate. So he's going to list 6 things that God hates. Actually, it says, yea, 7 are an abomination unto him. So these are 7 things that God really, really, really doesn't like. Well, let's see what they are. A proud look, a lying tongue, there we go, speaking lies, and hands that shed innocent blood, and heart that deviseth wicked imaginations, feet that be swift in running to mischief, a false witness that speaketh lies, and he that soweth discord among brethren. So of those 7 things, at least 3 of them involve what we say. I mean, he says a lying tongue, God hates that, but he also hates a false witness that speaketh lies. And he also hates he that soweth discord among brethren. So that's talking about someone, if you sow discord. How do you sow discord? Well, one way to sow discord is when you say something to someone over here, and then you say something to someone over there. Well, so-and-so says this about you. What do you think about this? This person told me this. This person, doesn't that sow discord? If you're saying something to this person and saying something else, God says he hates it. He hates that when people are sowing discord. He hates it when someone's a false witness. He hates it when someone has a lying tongue. This is something that God is really against. It says in Proverbs 12:19, the lip of truth shall be established forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment. So when you tell the truth, when you're truthful, that's something that's going to be established forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment. Like, the tendency is that one of the reasons why people lie is they lie to get themselves out of trouble. There's some sort of problem, they're trying to get themselves out of trouble, or maybe they're trying to get someone else in trouble, and so they tell a lie. And there's a reason why they're trying to, lift themselves up, or maybe put someone else down, or something like that. But what they don't consider is that might work in the short term. But is it going to work in the long term? Because you see, God sees, he hears every lie. And, the Bible says, be not deceived, God is not mocked. For whatsoever man soweth, that shall he also reap. So if we are sowing lies, we're going to reap the result of that. Okay? But not only should we speak truth rather than lies, we should also speak words of wisdom rather than foolishness. Have a look at Proverbs chapter number 31. Proverbs chapter number 31. This is a great chapter in the Bible where it talks about at least sort of more than half the chapter talks about the virtuous woman and all these great characteristics of her. And have a look at verse number 26. This is describing this virtuous woman. It says, "She openeth her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness." So if you're going to open your mouth and speak that which is wise, you need to have wisdom in your heart. Remember, because from the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. And so an important thing to realise is that we should really be speaking about things that we know about. We shouldn't just speak about things that we don't know about, because there can be a tendency, and remember the warning was, in the multitude of words there wanteth not sin. When we speak a lot, there can be a tendency, and we can easily pick this up. You pick it up from, maybe it's on the TV, like I don't recommend you have a TV, but on the TV they have these programs, they have these talk shows. Maybe like Oprah Winfrey, she's probably not even on anymore. Winfrey and Donahue, and I'm probably dating myself because there's probably a whole pile of new ones that are all out there. They have these talk shows and there's some host on there and people are on there with problems and things are there. And it's a forum for people to just say what they think. And the audience says all sorts of stuff and people are on there and Oprah's saying what she thinks. And all of this is just people giving their opinion on stuff. And so we can have the same attitude where we think we've got to have an opinion about everything. We've got to have a view on everything. But you actually don't. Because we don't know everything about everything. Now, there may be areas that we know about. There are areas that we maybe have some level of expertise in that. And that's fine. But in an area where we don't have a level of expertise, we should close our mouth. Because otherwise we'll end up saying things that are wrong. Okay, so we don't have to speak just for the sake of speaking. And so it's an important thing to understand. In her law, she openeth her mouth with wisdom, and her tongue is the law of kindness. So she's got wisdom. She's speaking about what she knows about. It says in James 3 verse 17, it says, "But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, and easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy." So we should be speaking, if we're speaking wisely, speak that which is pure. Okay, Philippians chapter number 4, verse 8, we sang about that before. It's basically describing what we should think about. Philippians chapter 4, turn and have a look at it. Philippians chapter 4 and verse number 8. Philippians chapter 4 and verse 8 says, "Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true," notice these things, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue and if there be any praise, think on these things. So notice, this is describing what we should be thinking about. We should be thinking about things that are true, honest, just, pure, lovely, things of good report, things of virtue, if there be any praise. That's what we should be thinking about. But obviously, if that's what you're thinking about, then that's going to be what comes out of your mouth. Because from the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. Okay? Have a look back in Ephesians, we were there earlier on. Go back to Ephesians chapter number 4 again. Ephesians chapter number 4. Excuse me. Ephesians chapter 4 and verse number 29. Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 29 says, "Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace unto the hearers." Now it says, let no corrupt communication. So it's saying, think if something's corrupt. If something's corrupt, it's something that's gone off. It's something that's bad. It's something that's rotten. Don't let bad communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use of edifying. You say, well, what's edifying? Edifying is talking about building up others. Okay, you might have heard of the word like an edifice. Okay, it's talking about a building. If you're going to edify others, that means to build them up. That means that your words can lift them up. That means you can say good things about them. Because the opposite of building up is destroying. You could build a building or you can knock it down. You can lift it up or you can flatten it. Okay? And so now there is a time when our words are supposed to throw things down. There is a time for that. Have a look in Jeremiah. Keep your finger in Ephesians. But have a look in Jeremiah chapter number 1. Jeremiah chapter number 1. Jeremiah chapter number 1 and verse number 10. Jeremiah chapter number 1 and verse number 10. And this is God. We'll actually go back to verse number... in fact, I just want to read the whole chapter, but no, we'll go back. Start in verse number... go back to 7. Jeremiah 1:7. It says, "But the Lord said unto me," so this is what God's saying to Jeremiah, "Say not, I am a child, for thou shalt go to all that I send thee, and whatsoever I command thee, thou shalt speak." So he's telling Jeremiah, I'm telling you what you're going to speak. This is what you should speak. Okay? Verse number 8 says, "Be not afraid of their faces, for I am with thee to deliver thee, saith the Lord." So he's saying, look, don't be afraid of people's faces. I'm telling you what you're going to speak. And obviously, whatever he's going to speak, there could be something that's going to cause him to be afraid and to not want to speak it. Well, let's have a look and see what it says. Verse number 9. "Then the Lord put forth his hand and touched my mouth. And the Lord said unto me, Behold, I have put my words in thy mouth." So these are God's words that he has put in Jeremiah's mouth. But then see what he says here. "See, I've set thee... See, I have this day set thee over the nations and over the kingdoms." Look what he says. "To root out and to pull down and to destroy and to throw down, to build and to plant." So this is what he's saying. This is what Jeremiah's ministry is about here. He says it's about rooting out, pulling down, destroying, throwing down, building and planting. Now wouldn't you say that the first 4 of those are pretty negative? Rooting out, pulling down, destroying, throwing down, and then it's got building and planting. So you've got 4 negative things there, and you've got 2 positive things. Now that was what Jeremiah was told to do, and Jeremiah was a preacher. And that's why within preaching often, if the preaching is biblical, there should be a lot of negative. Because it's saying this is what we shouldn't do. Now we should also have, this is what we should do, the encouragement to help people what to do. But this is preaching. This is not us interacting in just our normal talk. Okay? This is not just our normal what we're doing as brethren talking to one another and within fellowship. This is what should happen when it comes to preaching. And this is not the only place. I mean, we should all be familiar with 2 Timothy chapter number 4. 2 Timothy chapter number 4 and verse number 2 says, "Preach the word, be instant, in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and doctrine." We've got the same ratio. Remember, it was 6 to, there was 4 to 2, which is actually, that's like a 2 to 1 ratio. Over in Jeremiah 1, but here we see it says reprove, rebuke and exhort. Now reproving is telling someone that they're wrong, rebuking is telling someone they're wrong, but exhorting someone is encouraging someone to do right. So once again, we've got twice as much negative as we had positive. But once again, that is also an example of that's what a preacher is supposed to do. Okay? That's not saying that in our interactions. That's why it says here in Ephesians verse 4:29, "Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace unto the hearer." So saying what you say should build up. So in our words with one another, we should be building up. We should be saying things that will help people, not things that will tear them down. Because if we look around, we can all see faults in one another. Because we're all sinners. We all do wrong things. We all say wrong things. And so if we look around, we can see other people doing wrong. We can hear other people saying wrong. But it's not our position to say, well, I'm going to then correct you. Or worse than that, that one thing is to say, well, I'm going to correct you when you don't need to. You know, a soft answer turneth away wrath. You don't need to be going around correcting people. But worse than that is instead of saying, well, I'm going to correct you, I'm going to tell you what he's doing wrong. Isn't that? That's the really worst thing. That's not what we should be doing. So what comes out of our mouth, if we see things that are wrong, and you're going to, everyone's going to see things that are wrong, stop and say, do I need to say it? And 99% of the time, you don't need to. Now, am I saying that we should cover up sin? No, obviously not. If there are things that are real, if so-and-so is committing adultery, hey, tell someone about it. People need to know about that because the adulterer should be thrown out of the church. Okay, fair enough. But for the majority of things, that's not the case. And so what we need to do is, with our words, we have to build up. We have to lift people up and say what's right. We have to help others as opposed to pulling them down and tearing them down. Rightio. Now, we saw back in James chapter 3, we saw that the direction of our lives can be steered by the tongue. And we saw also in Luke 6:45 that our heart is revealed by the tongue. So when what we say, that actually reveals what's in our heart. So when we're tearing people down, that's revealing that there's a critical spirit in our heart that's coming out. Okay? So what can we do about it? What can we do about it? There's two things that I want us to focus on. Two things. And it's just be quite quickly. Two things. The first thing is we need to get our own tongues under control. Very first thing. Okay? In fact, didn't it say in James, let me have a look here, that I'm not misquoting or misremembering, but I think it talked about, it says, verse number 2. For in many things we offend all. If any man offend not in word, the same as a perfect man, and all able also to bridle the whole body. So saying, if you can control your tongue, if you can not offend in word, you'll actually control your whole body. Okay? Get our tongues under control, and that will help us in other areas of our life. Get our tongues under control. Why? So what we should do, very first thing is to be slow to speak. Stop. Be slow to speak. Be quick to listen, but be slow to speak. Why? Because the tongue is a fire. It's hard to stop once it gets started. Because once you say something to someone, you tell someone about something, or it's something about someone else, and then afterwards you realise, actually what I said, no, that wasn't right. But by then they might have told someone else. And then they've told someone else. And these days with the internet, the whole world, it's just gone. Okay? And so don't start the fire, because it's really hard to stop once it gets started. And I tell you what, here's a really selfish, here's a selfish reason that might help you to be slow to speak. Proverbs 17:28. Who wants people to think that they're wise? Would you like people to think you're wise, or would you like them to think you're a fool? It'd be nice if they thought you're wise. Well, it says in Proverbs 17:28, even a fool, when he holdeth his peace, is counted wise, and he that shutteth his lips is esteemed a man of understanding. So if you listen to people and just nod and, yep, interesting, and are quiet, they'll leave thinking, they're really smart, they're really wise, that person, and without even saying anything, okay? That's what the Bible says. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 28, we read that before, the heart of the righteous studieth the answer. In other words, you're careful about what you say, but the mouth of the wicked poureth out evil things. I've had some dealings with some people in my life that, and this is something I've been guilty of at times as well, but it's a particular situation I can think of where someone, and their mouth was pouring out wicked, evil things, and it was happening really quickly. It just came out and came out and came out. And I thought, honestly, I stepped back and think, did he really think about what he's saying? Did he honestly think about it? And in my interactions, I was as careful as possible to study to answer and be careful not to, and looking back, I can look back and say, now, did I say things that no, I was very careful not to say things that I shouldn't have said, because we can all make that mistake, okay? And so the heart of the righteous, it studieth the answer. Psalm 141 verse 3 says, set a watch, O Lord, before my mouth. Keep the door of my lips. Now we saw in James, didn't it say no man can control the tongue? No one can. Well, guess what? We can do our best, but we can't really control it. But what we can do, we can ask God. Set a watch, O Lord. That's talking about like a watch. Think of like a watchman, like someone guarding. Set a watch, O Lord, before my mouth. Keep the door of my lips. It's saying ask God to help us. Ask God to help us so that we don't say things, so we don't speak inadvisedly. So that's the first thing we can do, is keep our own tongues under control. Be slow to speak. Think about what you're saying. Think, do I really need to say this? But then the second thing we can do is we can get away from tongues that are speaking wrong things. Okay? When someone's speaking things that are wrong, we should get away from them. Proverbs chapter 17 verse 4 says, a wicked doer giveth heed to false lips. Someone who's wicked, they'll actually be listening to someone telling them lies. It says, and at the second half of the verse, and a liar giveth ear to a naughty tongue. Okay, so if we want to listen to people telling lies, or people who are saying things that are wrong or bad or naughty, that says something about us. We saw in Proverbs chapter 4, just look back there again, Proverbs chapter number 4, excuse me, Proverbs chapter 4 and verse number 23, Proverbs 4 verse 23, it says, keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. And we saw it said, put away from thee a froward mouth, and perverse lips put far from thee. So it's saying stay away from a froward mouth, stay away from someone who's got perverse lips. Let thine eyes look right on, and let thine eyelids look straight before thee. Ponder the path of thy feet, and let all thy ways be established. Turn not to the right hand nor to the left, remove thy foot from evil. So it's saying, ponder the path of your feet. It's saying, think about where you go. Think about where you go, because where you go, that's going to affect who you're interacting with. So if you've got people who we know people who speak inadvisedly, people who say perverse things, people who tell dirty jokes, people who have vulgar language. We know people who do that. So it's like, well, best not to hang around with people who do that, because otherwise it's going to come in your ears and it's going to go into your heart and it'll come out of your mouth, and that's not what we should be doing. Have a look at Psalm 101. Psalm 101. Psalm 101, verse number 1. It says, I will sing of mercy and judgment. Unto thee, O Lord, will I sing. I will behave myself wisely. That's what we want to do. We want to behave ourselves wisely in a perfect way. Oh, when wilt thou come unto me? I will walk within my house with a perfect heart. Well, how can we have this perfect heart? How can we walk within our own house with a perfect heart? Verse 3 says, I will set no wicked thing before mine eyes. I hate the work of them that turn aside. It shall not cleave to me. So that's saying, I will set no wicked thing before mine eyes. Don't put wicked things in front of you. Okay, and obviously the obvious example we can all think of is the television. Don't put wicked things in front of you, because when you put wicked things in front of you, what does it say? Because it's going to cleave. He says, I will set no wicked thing before mine eyes. I hate the work of them that turn aside. It shall not cleave to me. Because if he did put wicked things before his eyes, it would cleave. Because what goes in, you remember it. It doesn't come out again. What goes in, you can't unsee something. Once you've seen it, you've seen it. Once you've heard something, you've heard it. And then it says in verse 4, a froward heart shall depart from me. I will not know a wicked person. Okay, so someone who's speaking froward things, depart from him. I will not know a wicked person. Now, you might say, well, I don't know any sort of really wicked people. My friends up there. But what? If you watch the telly, you will know wicked people. Because the telly is full of wicked people. Okay? People who perverse people, who love that which is evil, people who hate God, who blaspheme God, they do all sorts of wicked things, and their household names. People know them, don't they? If you what's the New Zealand one? Shortland Street, isn't it? That's the sort of the famous, it's the New Zealand soap opera, whatever it's called. That's just full of smut and filth and wickedness. Every kind of abomination you can come across is in Shortland Street. And yet, a lot of people could tell you the names of all the people on Shortland Street. They would know them, what they do, who they are. He says, look, I will not know a wicked person. How about this? Whoso privily slandereth his neighbour, him will I cut off. Him that hath an high look and a proud heart will not I suffer. Someone who's speaking about his neighbour, it says cut them off. Someone who's got a high look and a proud heart will not I suffer. Someone who's proud. You think about some of the famous rock stars and movie stars and people. It says, look, I'm not going to suffer them. I'm not going to be around them, because if you are, they will affect you. Instead, verse 6, it says, mine eyes shall be upon the faithful of the land, that they may dwell with me. He that walketh in a perfect way, he shall serve me. And then look at this one, verse number 7. He that worketh deceit shall not dwell within my house. One of the best things we ever did was years ago now, was we threw away our TV. And now I can say that. He that worketh deceit shall not dwell within my house, because it was a TV, it's just full of deceit. Okay? And it's unlike now, when I talk about the TV, understand, the internet it's hard to say. It's like, is it more dangerous or less dangerous? In some ways, I don't want to say it's more dangerous or less dangerous. They're different because of the fact there's worse things on the internet than there is on the TV, without a doubt. There's no doubt about that. But the thing about the TV is you don't really have control over it. Someone else is controlling it. Someone else is programming it. Even if you choose and get your TV guide and so, well, I'm only going to watch this particular program, they bang ads on. In the middle of it, you're sitting there watching a program, and then suddenly there's naked women dancing around in their underwear. You've got no control over that. Okay, someone else is controlling it. But even that, show me the righteous TV programs. There isn't. Okay, whereas the internet has definitely got worse stuff. But at the same time, you can choose what it is, what website you go to, what it is that you look at, what is it you read, what it is that you listen to. I recommend obviously you want to have ad blockers, you want to have things that you don't see these images and stuff. That's definitely something you should do. But hey, look, he that worketh deceit shall not dwell within my house. And a TV, there's no doubt that it's full of deceit. Because the thing about it is, people just think, if it's on the news, oh, it must be true. But no, what's on the news is actually not. What's on the news is lies. There are people with an agenda, and they're saying things, they're working deceit. Second part of that verse, he that telleth lies shall not tarry in my sight. I will early destroy all the wicked of the land, that I may cut off all wicked doers from the city of the Lord. And so, hey, I was glad the day when we did that, destroyed all the wicked of the land. Now, I didn't go out and destroy them. What I did is I took my TV and I smashed it with a hammer, chucked it in the wheelie bin and just destroyed it. Best thing I ever did. It goes bang. It's quite interesting when you do. When you break the tube. Probably don't tell the recyclers that. That'd be bad. But anyway, so that's your recommendations. Look, get away from people that are speaking wrong things. Tongues that are speaking wrong things. Keep our own tongues under control, but also put away these things from us. So, we've seen our words, they have value. What we say has value. At least it should have value. Stop and think before you speak. Be quick to hear and be slow to speak. Think about what you're about to say. Is what you're about to say, is it true? Or is it just something you heard? Because we can often just hear something and then just pass it on, not knowing whether it's true. And that means you could be a party to telling lies. Okay, so if you're not 100% sure something's true, don't pass it on. Okay? Is it helpful to the person you're speaking to? Is it building them up? If they're doing or if they're saying, are you helping them? From them hearing your words, will that build them up? Will they feel better? Or are you tearing them down and will they feel worse? It's really important. That whole thing, what does it say? If you've got nothing nice to say nothing. So stop and think. Don't be in a hurry to say something before it comes out your mouth. It's like set a filter. Set a filter between your brain and your mouth. Because all sorts of random thoughts we have, but stop, put the filter and think, just because you have a thought doesn't mean you have to say it. Okay? Is it helpful? Is it going to build them up or is it going to tear them down? Is it kind? What about this? Think about what you're about to say and think, is this kind? And if you're saying something about someone who's not there, and if you're saying something negative about them, and you're telling it to someone else, is that kind? That is never kind. That is not a kind thing to do. Okay? That's not something we should be doing. It says in 1 Corinthians 13:4, it says, charity, which is another word for love, charity suffereth long and is kind. Charity envieth not. Charity vaunteth not itself. So it's not puffed up. Charity vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up, doth not behave itself unseemly, seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked. Don't be easily provoked. Thinketh no evil. You see, this is something I find to be really helpful, is that in any situation, you'll have situations happen in your life where people will do things or people say things, or maybe you hear someone has done something or said something, and you might think something about it. Now, understand, you don't know necessarily what that person was thinking when they did or said what they did or said. You don't know. Now, you can think, well, probably they could have done it because of this, or they could have done it because of that. We've kind of got a choice. But the fact is, we don't really know. But what a lot of people will do is they will say, well, this person did that, therefore they did it because of this reason. And they'll come up with a reason, which might be right, it might not. But then they'll just treat it as though that's the fact. And that's not. It says what? Thinketh no evil. And the thing is, when you have people that you don't like as much, you'll have a tendency to think evil about them. That's not what we should do. Assume the best of people. How about that? Instead, you ever heard people about that assume the worst? Try this. Assume the best. Look at a situation and think, now what would be the best, what's the best possible interpretation you can think of? Assume that. Think that. And you know what? You'll be a lot happier if you do that. The world will be a better place from where you are. It won't have changed the world, but it will, in your interactions, it will have changed, okay? Obviously, our words, they've got value. We should use them wisely, not foolishly. The direction of our lives, the direction of others, it can be steered by what we choose to say and what we choose not to say. When we speak, it reveals what's in our hearts. So, what can we get out of this? Decide today to control your tongue. So, I'm going to control my tongue. Ask God to help you. Be swift to hear, quick to listen, slow to speak. Let your speech be always with grace, it says in Colossians 4:6. If you want to change what comes out of your mouth, then change what goes into your heart. You know, we're talking about the Bible march, reading 9 chapters a day. If you start putting that much Bible into your heart, that's going to change what comes out of your mouth. And you'll notice that. People who read the Bible a lot, it comes out. People who watch the TV a lot, it comes out. You know, people who hang around people with filthy mouths, remember the kids at school swearing? What goes in, it comes out. Okay, so change what goes into your heart, and that will change what comes out of your mouth. Let's pray. Gracious Lord, we thank you for your word. Lord, please help each one of us to be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. Lord, our words have got power. You said life and death are in the power of the tongue. Lord, help us to use our words to impart life. I mean, above all things, help us to preach the gospel. Help us to preach the gospel to others. And with our words, impart life. Give eternal life. Lord, but just in our interactions with people, help us to build people up. Help us to speak what is right. Help us to think what is right. What sort of things are true, what sort of things are honest, what sort of things are just, what sort of things are pure, what sort of things are lovely, what sort of things are of good report. If there be any virtue and if there be any praise, help us to think on these things. Help us to speak these things. Lord, we praise you and we thank you and we love you. In Jesus' precious name, amen.